Good morning. Today is Buddha Purnima, 2565th Buddha Purnima. And this is the day he was born, he was enlightened, and he entered into Parinirvana. According to earliest available records of Theravada tradition and an inscription from Bodh Gaya, Buddha entered into Parinirvana in 544 BC, which means he died 544 years before the lifetime of Jesus Christ. Now, coming to the question of methods of meditation adopted by Buddha, before I address this question, I would like to briefly explain to you, though you are aware of these facts. Once again, I will just touch and take off about his first spiritual journey. After having experienced revulsion, vairagya or virakti at heart, Gautama the Siddhartha left his family, his near and dear one, his kingdom, the Kapilavastu. He wandered around for several years in pursuit of an ultimate truth, a Brahma Satya, and seeking an answer for sufferings and miseries of mankind. In this process, he met various religious teachers and highly celebrated saints of the period. He inquired from them, he examined, he followed every instruction given by them, but there was no result. He couldn't find that ultimate truth. So in this way, for 6 years, he underwent severest of severe austerities, Kathora Dikshas. He became a bag of skin and bones. He withered away. He mortified his body and flesh. In fact, he was at the verge of death. Therefore, you must remember one thing, that Buddha was not the way that what you see in a normal conventional statues, a healthy and a cheerful and a smiling young man. But he was totally like a skeleton at the verge of death. But this kind of statues, what do you find? It is started from the Gandhara school of art, 2nd century BC and all that, you're keeping apart. This is the condition that when Sujata meets him on the banks of river Niranjana, in the village called Senani, and offers him rice puddle. Accepting same, he crosses the Niranjana river on a grass bundle given by a farmer called Satyana, sits under Bodhi tree, attains awakening or enlightenment in the Uruvela garden, currently known as Bodh Gaya. Thereby, Gautama Siddhartha had become Gautama the Buddha. And after realizing, he understood that the truth behind which he was in pursuit for 6 years and mortifying his body is nowhere, right in front of his eyes, and then and there and everywhere. But now comes the question of your question. What are the methods adopted by Gautam Buddha to attain such a great enlightenment? What made him such an outstanding great monk? The mind, which has pioneered, revolutionized, and influenced the thought process of mankind for almost 2500 years. What is that? What is that secret that which made him like that? Is a general question, and it is worth asking. It was nothing but the process of meditation, the dhyana. But the dhyana what both Buddha adopted is a unique, different and unconventional. Do not belong to any of the existing tradition of contemporary periods. His dhyana method has another components within it, which are called, number 1, anapanasati, number 2, vipassana, number 3, samatha. These are the 3 elements which allowed Gautama the Buddha to attain unwavering awakening, perfect insight, a tranquil mind, a quiescent state of mind, an unimpeded, unrestricted state of mind status, and also allowed him to grasp the Brahma Satya, the Tatata or suchness or ultimate truth, finally attaining the enlightenment itself. Now, coming to the Anapanasati. What is Anapanasati? Anapanasati is a Pali word. Remember one thing, Buddha never preferred to preach any of his sermons in classical Sanskrit, but he preferred language of the day, language of a common man. What was it? It was Pali, a corrupt form of Sanskrit, which was spoken 2500 years before. So this Anapanasati also appears in that Pali language. Anapana means in-breath, out-breath, inhalation, exhalation, or breathing process. Sati, which derived from the root Sanskrit word of smriti, is awareness or the mindfulness. When we bring them together, what this Anapanasati stands for is a mindful or an awareness breathing. What is the greatness of it? Spiritually, every day for several hours, Buddha had undertaken this Anapanasati practices for entire life. Similarly, thousands of monks for almost 2500 years, they upheld this practice. Though initially it was belonging to the Theravada tradition, but it was practiced by multiple schools of Mahayana Buddhism. It was practiced in Vajrayana Buddhism, Tibetan. It was also practiced in the Zen Buddhism. We find for these thousands of years, this practice was upheld and practiced in India, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Tibet, Bhutan, Mongolia, China, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan and Hong Kong, etc. And what else is the greatness of this particular Anapanasati practice is, when you draw a comparison with the Vipassana and Samatha, the Vipassana and Samatha occurred though in a fleeting occurrences in the earliest literature, but the Vipassana and Samatha appeared in complete bloom only during the Abhidhamma period, that is around 2nd century AD, which is almost around 300-400 years after the parinirvana of Buddha. But whereas Anapanasati appeared in complete maturity right from the period of Bodhidharma's disciples, Buddha's disciples. Thereby, what we understand is, it is the base, it is the pedestal, it is the foundation for Samatha and Vipassana. So it needs all the attention. How to do it? In very simple terms. In the very earlier text that it mentions that You select a place, number one. The place, a secluded one, could be a thickly wooded area or a forest or the fringes of towns or villages, away from the bustle of activity, in an isolated place. Next, sit in a cross-legged position, means the Padmasana. Third one is sit erect. And the fourth one is you undertake or indulge in this Anapanasati of in-breathing, out-breathing. On surface, it appears so simple, but its profundity and its depth is unfathomable, which we will see in course of our study. Remember one thing, that before we further go into Anapanasati, meditation can never be done. It has to happen. And meditation requires no efforts. But at the same time, the path leading to meditation, the steps leading to meditation, the rungs in the ladder that takes you to the transcendental wisdom, has several components, methods and systems and all. Here comes the question of our various components of our Anapanasati. In the rose garden, you are the one who grow tall wild weeds by your efforts, thereby obscuring the sight of rose. It is you who produce those violent waves on the tranquil lake, thereby failing to witness the moon in a tranquil lake. The lake is there, the roses are there. What do you need to do is remove those impediments, remove those obstacles. Meditation happens. For Buddha, the time was ripe, the ground was fertile, and there was a spark that ignited, and spontaneously he was awakened and attained enlightenment. But you wear those shades or the glosses which changes the entire color of the world. And few impurities or the dust particles in your eyes can obscure the vast sky. Just by placing a small palm before you, you can obstruct the view of a blazing sun. You have to remove those impediments. You have to put down those glasses, but not the eyes. Not the eyes. Then there is your very self. Then there is your very tathata. Now in this way, the earliest texts, they explain several steps. Maybe might be boring for you, but these are all meant for the people who seek a transcendental wisdom and who are likely to dedicate their entire lives. What are these? In the very early texts, particularly in the Majjhima Nikaya, in the 118th chapter, which may be irrelevant for you, Anapanasati Sutra or Ananda Sutra or Satipatthana Sutra are the agamas that were translated in the China by the earliest Indian monks, like highly celebrated monks like Buddhaghosa by 2nd century AD itself. These texts, they give us further explanation about Anapanasati. They occur, we call it as 4 types of mindfulness and 7 factors of awakening. What are these 4 types of mindfulness? They are called 4 tetrads. Why 4 tetrads? Because each part again subdivided into another 4. So totally we have 16 elements. All these 16 elements, they are interdependent. Without one, the another one do not arise, do not affect. Once you wanted to influence one element, you need to have a mastery over the other. Therefore, here comes the pratitya samutpada or dependent origination. So, all these particular elements are stitched together. And these elements, as we see, they involve your body, they involve your entire organs, your blood, flesh. They also involve your entire nervous system, your brain and its components, your limbic system, your conscious, your various types of conscious feelings, sensations, and perceptions. So it's an interplay between all these things. But when we say in a traditional way, it is an interplay between various skandhas, which we call it as rupa, vedana, sanya, samskara, and vijnana, which we talk it just in the future. So very first thing, what in simple ways it is told is the first tetrad has about, first quadruple, first four parts have about a kaya samskara, means it's about a body. The first it starts with the body. The body and the awareness of your breathing of your body. That breathing he brought in junction, that which you take it when you are first born, the first act is the breath. And the last act when you go away is the breath, between is your life. That breathing, the first thing he says, concentrate on breathing. Observe. The very next thing he says that observe the long or short or warm or cool breath. Third one he says that experience your entire body. The fourth one he says that calm down your body. So it appears as simple as that, but briefly I try to explain you. The very first thing, just you observe your in-breath and out-breath, and very next component when you go. Now you observe the nature of breath, not just only breath. You are only observing the nature of breath. It's a long breath, it's a short breath, it's a warm breath, it's a cool breath, it is the hurried breath, it is a calm breath, it is a tight breath, it is a loose breath. What kind of a breath it is? You just observe, but do not interfere. Allow it to happen. And also observe the location of the breath, nature of the breath, and the duration of the breath. Now next, when you come to experience the body, what it meant by using breath as a tool. Once you inhale, right from your head till to the tip of your toe, you experience the vortex of that breath, the storm of that inhalation, when it reaches to your toe, when it reaches to various organs, when it comes up, finally when it exits from your nostril. In this entire process, you became aware of your entire body, its aggregates, its parts, its nervous system, and you will gain the experience. Like I am sitting here, if I am having a pain, where is the pain? Where is the location of the breath at that particular time, that particular moment? How long the duration of that particular thing took it in my heart, maybe in my elbow? What is the duration of the breath? This is a localization. And what kind of nature of breath? Did I inhale to my elbow a warm breath or a cold one? And how long I took it there? This you are. So you are attaining the mastery over the body. Through this breathing, one day comes that the body itself becomes a breath body. And through this experience of calming down of mind, finally, ultimately, you calm down the body. By using the breath as a tool, you calm down and you attain kaya samskara. So number one element in the five skandhas, the rupa, the kaya, the body is over. The very next one is that in the five skandhas, we have Vedana, Sanya, Samskara. What is Vedana? The very next thing what Buddha said is Vedana. He said Pitti, he said Sukha, he said that mental fabrications, and also he said that like liberation of, calming of your chitta. Now what this, that when we have to explain? The very first thing is that what we have in the Vedana is the Piti. The Piti are the kind of a Sukha. They are nothing but, they are the feelings, sensations and perceptions, like the images across your mirror. The Piti means rapture. After having taken this body culture and attained the body calmness, you might erupt sometimes into a kind of a bliss, a rapture, a bliss, followed by the Sukha means a happiness. Try to understand, a happiness is an emotional feeling, but bliss is not. Bliss is a mind state. Bliss is a mind state. It remains eternal. This can remain a transient. And when we translate this particular bliss onto other afflictions of your mind, the Vedana, what happens is you would be able to manipulate the other Vedanas, other feelings, other sensations. Now in this way, the mental fabrications is the third part, what we say in the skandhas as samskara, or we call it as volition. What is volition? Unless you have a feeling, a perception, or a kind of an emotion, your volition will never occur. Volition means your interplay of your will, your discriminatory ability to choose what you wanted it. Now on your mind plane, you have a negative, positive. You have a happiness or a sorrow. You have sufferings or an enjoyment. You have a greed or a lust, or you have a delusion. Now, in this particular process of this third component of samskara, citta samskara, volition, you are choosing what you want for further pacifying your, calming down your mind faculties, your feelings and sensations. So this is the second part. So now your thought process are calmed down, your body is calmed down, and you have grown aware of these particular things, both the things. Now very next step you go to the citta, that is the mind, the perceptive mind. Always try to distinguish between your feelings, sensations, emotions or whatever and the mind. If a mind is like a lamp, the light is those things. You cannot compare with a light and lamp together. You can't compare ocean waves with the ocean. You can't compare, you cannot draw similarities between a mirror and its images. Now here comes the citta. In the third tetrad, in the first part, you try to turn inward. Using your breath, you try to understand what is your mind, what is your chitta, what state it is. Have you ever turned inside? Have you any time questioned yourself? Do you have one self, a mind and your astitva? How does it appear? Have you witnessed it? Have you been with it even for a few seconds or few minutes in your life? Now you have to be with the awareness. And further, you satisfy that particular mind in accordance with the dharma, the teachings of Buddha. There comes the stability. And once you acquire that stability, then what you do in the fourth state is you liberate the mind itself. There are now no clouds across the sky. There are no waves on the ocean. There are no images over the mirror. The mind loses its time, space, dimensions and becomes one with the nature. These are the three tetrads, and the fourth tetrads being the investigating the doctrine or the dharma. What is that investigating doctrine or the? Here we are not interested about entire teachings of Buddha, but the essence of it. What is the essence of it? is the impermanence, in which we have Anishchita, Anatta and Dukkha. One is impermanence, and Anatta means a transient self, there is no permanent self. And the third one is Dukkha or suffering. When you contemplate on these three things, what results is you come to an understanding of an impermanent nature of ever-changing, constant flux, non-permanent world. That is the very first base, which further leads you to the very next stage of Vairagya. What is Vairagya? The Vairagya is the dispassion. Dispassion. Now you are not passionate about that object, that subject, the person, the place, the doctrine, or whatever it is. Next comes is the third stage, we call it as a Nirodha, which is a third noble truth. What is Nirodha? The Nirodha is nothing but end of craving and end of arising. The craving and arising ceases, the Nirodha, which paves the way for the fourth step. That is, we call it as relinquishment or Pati Nisagha. Pati Nisagha means relinquishment, means you understand now. It is not worth clinging and you relinquish. These are the total 16 elements in the four tetrads. Followed with the similar things occurs in the 7 factors that affects the awakening. Like we have a sati, means that the awareness and the mindfulness which we have discussed, and we have also dharma vichara, means doctrinal analytical understanding. I mean, these are all the things that which paves the way for awakening, the 7 steps through the sati and dharma vichara. And the next one is the virya. What it meant by virya? Like we found this virya occurring in the Chando Viryam Chittam Mimamsa of Buddha's preaching when you wanted to achieve the riddhis and siddhis. The viryam is the diligent effort, a persistent effort. An anapanasati or a meditation on an enlightenment or awakening is not a one-time affair. It requires a constant, persistent effort of virya. And that is one of the awakening steps. The virya, the diligent efforts. Next we come to the what we have discussed just before, the piti, which is the rapture or the bliss that which comes out of after your undertaking this extensive meditational practices. Then comes the what you call pasidi, means serenity. What is pasidi? Is the serenity, a calm, a stability. And this is where in the entire thing, be it in any tetrad, whatever it is focused, the body calming, mind calming, and its byproducts calming, and dharma doctrine calming down of your body, and the serenity and pasidi. This is what actually later after 1000 years Bodhidharma emphasized more, and pacification of the mind. So that is the pasidi, which is the 5th component. When we come to the 6th component is the samadhi. Samadhi means absorption. You become one with the nature, the non-dualistic state of nature, that is Advaita, where like a salt in the water you dissolve, like a waves on the ocean you dissolve, you become universal. And very next one is, we call it as a upeksha, the last step for the awakening. What is upeksha? In the upeksha, a monk, after attaining all these stages, he becomes immune from positive and negative, happiness and sorrow, life and death, darkness and light, and sin and merit. Further, for him, a nirvana or samsara appears same. A mundane world or supramundane world, he deals it with same. So therefore, he detaches from the two opposite poles or two extremes, and he attains a neutral state of upeksha. He becomes just neutral to everything. And these are the steps which allows an enlightenment, which gives the way for the nirvana, and also which terminates the root of dukkha, suffering or the miseries, which makes a Siddhartha Gautama a Tathagata or Buddha. Tathagata, thus past. Tatha Agata, thus born. Tatha Agata, thus never came. So these are these great steps. Now question is that here, what I would like to tell you, that there is a difference between the yogic practices and this particular Anapanasati. Try not to mistake these two elements. You find in this entire teachings of Buddha, nowhere he mentioned about mudra, mantra, or a pranayama, or anything like that. And a pranayama that when we do it, which also involves breathing like your Anapanasati, but in the pranayama, what do you have? A controlling of breath, restraining of breath, or manipulating of breath, or efficacy of breath. These all things are not there in Anapanasati. In Anapanasati, neither you control, nor you regulate, nor you manipulate, nor you find for an efficacy. Just you be witness. You are just a witness. You witness just that particular thing of your various components. And at the end of day, by practicing all these things, what do you achieve is observation of your body, observation of your breath, observation of your mind, observation of your feelings, sensations and emotions, observation of dharmas, and realizing these same things. Next step is you allow it to happen. You don't interfere. You allow it to happen and you don't interfere. Next is you uncondition yourself from the conditioned self, what you have been born and ever since you are conditioned, you uncondition. Next is you liberate yourself. So between the reflections, between the expressions of mind and suppressions and arisings and falls, there is a observation. Between a reflection, between a suppression, there is an observation. Only who remains there is the witness, the Sakshi, the witness. And rest everything, all the clouds, they disappear from the sky. All the waves disappear from the ocean. This is the quintessential difference between a pranayama and Anapanasati, though both involve some breathing. Now, before I conclude, I would like to ask you one thing. Why did Buddha give so much importance? Why he accorded such a kind of significance to this breath? You should have taken up any panchaskandhas, any body aggregates, or its byproducts like vedanas, or its pain and suffering or something. Or he could have taken up any religious texts, various religious texts. People take it as a meditation object. Or he could have taken up any deities, any religious deities, or their attributes, their adjectives. People do meditate on various devatas, devis, or the deities. No. He could have taken up any philosophy, any ideas, any concepts, any doctrine, any dogma. No, he never took it. Just he took a mere breathing as a tool to rise to that particular transcendental wisdom which revolutionized entire spiritual world. We will find answers to this in the coming episode. In a couple of days, we will try to post. For now, thank you very much.